Join me every month for the inspiration to find your finish line. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Find Your Finish Line. I hope you all are keeping your New Year's resolutions going so you can find your individual finish lines in 2025. And if you haven't set a resolution yet, what the heck? There's still like 10 months, 11 months left in the year, so get it done. Thank you again for tuning into my podcast. The numbers always prove to me that I want to continue bringing you guests that can change your life, inspire you to get off your butt and get it done. And thank you to triathlete.com for rating Find Your Finish Line as one of the top endurance podcasts in the U.S. for 2024. My guest today is not a household name like some previous guests we've had on Find Your Finish Line, like Laura Phillip, Greg Welch, Lionel Sanders, Lucy Charles, or others. But his life journey exceeds anything they have accomplished. He's a 6-time Ironman finisher. But those finishes, I'm sure he'll agree, pale in comparison to his real life journey and the finish he had to find with that. Paul Weigel was 43 years old when he was diagnosed with stage 3 colorectal cancer. But to combat it, he actually pretended to not be a colon cancer patient, competing in triathlons. Heck, he even did a half Ironman with a chemotherapy backpack on. Who does that? He's the author of his new book, Iron Dad, a cancer survivor's story of discovering strength, life, and love through fatherhood, which I had the honor of reading the audiobook version for him. Welcome, Paul, to Find Your Finish Line.
Thanks, Mike. It's great to be here with you. And dang, you did such an awesome job of reading the book and making a voice to the story. So it's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Yeah, it was a great little project we had together. I loved it. By the way, you do know this. My first question on Find Your Finish Line to all my guests is, did you get a workout in today, Paul?
I have not gotten my workout in yet, but I do have 3 hours planned starting at 4 o'clock when the workday is done. So we are getting ready and we're getting set. As you said, New Year's resolutions. I'm still trying to figure out if I'm doing a full or a half this year. And so figuring out that work schedule a little bit. We're getting closer.
Well, it's always funny when I ask that question, if they haven't done a workout yet. I haven't had anybody say, I'm not going to do one today.
Right.
Everybody goes, oh yeah, I've got a ride schedule and I've got this scheduled. But if people did do a workout today, they're like so proud. Oh yeah, you didn't get me. I swam, 3,000 yards this morning. So,
right.
I love starting out with that. So we're going to get into your cancer journey, but I know you wanted to, through your book, give guidelines and lessons, alerting men to the world of colon cancer. But it was also a love story between father and daughter. That's how I saw your book. Yeah. We've talked to a lot of athletes through the years that have received a shocking diagnosis about their life. They sit there in disbelief, the doctor telling them what's going on. Go back to that moment, Paul. Was it like he was talking to someone else, or did you take it in, or was it just unbelievable?
Mike, every time somebody asks me that question, I get overwhelmed with the emotion of just thinking through it again. For me, it was crazy because honestly, there was no thought in my world that I had cancer, that I came out of a colonoscopy and things were cloudy and I was waking up like anesthesia and all of a sudden I heard lingering words saying, you have a mass, you have a tumor, you have a growth. And my first immediate thoughts were, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. How soon am I going to die? And what kind of legacy am I going to be leaving? And just as much, as you said, I was 43 years old. I was an Ironman triathlete, so there's no reason I should have been thinking about being sick. I had a 3-year-old daughter, and just the thought of not seeing seeing her life and seeing her grow up was overwhelming and so beyond scary.
Did you really think, Paul? I mean, you're sitting there getting a diagnosis, and a lot of people have told me, I thought, I'm going to fight this, I'm going to do this. But you were actually kind of, oh my gosh, am I going to die? I'm going to die. I can't die. I haven't done everything I want to do in my life. That's where your mind went.
Immediately. Yeah. It's one of those weird juxtapositions. And it's so funny
Mm.
you know, as an athlete, yes, there is a part that says, I'm going to finish this race. And every time we work to start training for the next Ironman, there is no doubt that we are going to be able to finish. But so there was this fight for me saying, of course I'm going to win. Of course I'm going to survive. Of course things are going to be okay. But the way doctors talked, the way I kind of understood how my body was acting, um, yeah, I didn't think, and I said all the right things. That's why I did an Ironman triathlon 6 months after finishing chemo. Was I thought I could be strong, but there was a huge part of me every day that thought I was going to die and I was going to die soon.
This is not something that colon cancer that men have an easy time talking about. They ignore it. They don't
Right.
want to go in and get a colonoscopy. They don't listen to the signs. And you knew something was going on inside of you, something that was wrong before you sat in that doctor's office. You were
Mm-hmm.
experiencing, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. You had blood in your stool. You were losing weight, and you kind of attributed that to, well, I'm working out a lot and I'm doing Ironmans and
I had
and
my training schedule planned out pretty well. That's true.
yeah. But did you feel you did wait too long to go see the doctor?
What I don't feel I waited too long to go. Maybe. It's a trick question. The challenge we run into, like you said, with guys, is we don't want to have those rough conversations with doctors. And especially when you start talking about your colon or having any type of tests that are happening below the waistline. I mean,
Mm.
I had the symptoms, um, but I was athletic. I was doing things. I had talked with a couple of my primary care physicians about those symptoms, but they said things like, you're turning 40, your GI system just doesn't work as well. You're riding a ton. You've likely got a hemorrhoid from riding on your bike and you need to get your bike adjusted. So it was
Mm.
small pieces that, when you look at things individually, I mean, as Ironman triathletes, we are always fighting and dealing with some type of nagging injury. So it's what's that point? Um, so did I push hard enough with my doctors early on? No. When I got to the point that things were critically bad, um, yeah, it certainly was too late. And if I had had some of those harder conversations with doctors 6 months or a year beforehand, or even my 30s, because I know that I had symptoms even when I was young, like 36, 37, that it would have
Wow.
changed my life a lot.
But you have no family history of colon cancer.
Right.
No other men in your family, and in the 30s, you're just a healthy, strapping man, triathlete, and in good shape. So that was when you got the colonoscopy at 43. That was your very first one, correct?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I had there, and to even think about doing a colonoscopy, this is now 10 years ago, was a big stretch with doctors. Your point of being healthy and active, I mean, when I was 38, I ran a 3:39 marathon. So there's no way that I could possibly consider that I was sick, right? I mean, I'm close to running, and I did it at weighing 205 pounds. So if you're doing that
Wow.
much and that strong, you can't imagine that your body is breaking down from the inside out.
I heard you say, and we talked about it once about that diagnosis, and you're trying to get through it all. But the one thing that pulled you through, the one great thing, was obviously your daughter Natalie. But you didn't want her through all this to think of you as a loser. And between you and me, I hate saying that word. I don't like that word. I wish it would leave the language, but we understand it. Why would you think that your daughter would think her dad was a loser?
There's a fine line of being a loser and being a quitter. What I have run into for my entire personal and professional career is that I have these incredibly high goals. And what I think is even marginally acceptable, and I think probably every Ironman triathlete feels this. I'm doing an Ironman triathlon, I can do anything. But if all of a sudden you can't do that, what does that say about your identity? What does that say about your ability to
Mm.
just suck up and do something amazing? Um, I mean, for me, certainly there was a huge aspect of losing's a hard word, and it's all relative. I just as much did not want her to think I was a quitter. I wanted her to have a wonderful legacy of me doing everything and anything beyond uh, what any reasonable person could do. Uh, and here we are 10 years later, and it is so cool now to see her, now that she's 14, almost 15, reflecting and owning that time and seeing how connected I am with her as a dad. And so I know forever she'll never view me as a quitter or a loser in any kind of way. No, of course, I don't think any parents would think that they're losers, and we try and do our best for our kids, but
Yeah.
I didn't want to do anything less than 1,000,000% for her.
So you went through the surgery. The mass in the colon was like fist size, wasn't it? It
Yeah,
wasn't like a small little marble they took out of there. It was fist size,
yeah.
and that had to be a tough surgery. Uh, how long were you in the hospital? How long was your recovery? I know you did an Ironman like 6 months after your chemo, but after the
Yep.
surgery, was that like an Ironman in itself?
Yes, absolutely. You know, the beauty of being an athlete and setting our artificial high expectations is we blow away expectations of doctors all the time. When I had, so your point, yes, I had, my tumor was the size of my fist at the junction of my rectum and my colon. I ended up being pretty much 100% blocked, which meant that nothing was going through. Before surgery, we almost had an emergency surgery before radiation, but it was just then when I got in, as you said, as part of the intro, I pretended I wasn't a patient. And so doctors were saying, okay, you should expect to be in here 4 days. And by being in here 4 days, you're going to relearn how to walk, and you are going to figure out if your GI system actually works and all these different things. And I said, great, so I'm getting out of here in 2, right? And so, I mean, I always had this pressure and expectation that any goal they had, I was going to blow it away. We've talked about me strapping on my chemotherapy backpack and doing a half Ironman. Um, at 6 weeks post surgery, I barely could walk around the block, and I went out and I did a sprint triathlon. Uh, and um, and so yes, the surgery and the experience was like an Ironman in itself, and going through all of the treatment of chemo and radiation and surgery, and then more chemo and um, but the
Are you
cool
good
part,
now? You're absolutely clear.
yeah, yeah. And I'm very lucky. Here I am 11 years later, 12, 11, almost 12 years later. They were able to get everything out. For a long time, I had false positives. I had some suspicious lesions on my liver and lungs. I ended up having valley fever at one point. Uh, I've actually now at this point had both my hips replaced too. And so the reflection on CAT scans of my hips would lead to weird shadows that they would see and say that were a concern.
Wow.
So it was about 9 years that I was a cancer patient. But yeah, now I'm free and clear and happy and healthy. And that's part of why I'm
And
here
you've
now, is that I get a chance to tell the story. And it was only that I got to this point that I feel I could. Because during the time, I kept thinking that one day cancer was going to come back and I was going to be dead in 6 months.
and you tell the story so well, which is something that needs to be told. Did you even know at that time that colon cancer for men is the number one cause for death? And heck, it's the number 2 cause for death among women.
Right.
Did you have any idea?
No, not at all. That was, that was one of the, and life, world has changed in 10 years. If we've got a lot of different screenings, we've now talked about, we've dropped down the age for screening down from 50 to 45. Still would not have
I know.
caught for me. But when I was going through my list of items, and I remembered the night before, there were two key things that just blew me away. The night before I went in for my colonoscopy, I was going through a list of all the different things that possibly could be happening to me. I thought I had Crohn's. I thought I had diverticulitis. I just thought I had IBS. Nowhere on my list in the internet did cancer come up. And then, ironically, and this is before Cologuard and some of the tests, I did have some blood work done. And the last thing that the medical assistant said to me was, well, your blood work came out clear and you don't have cancer, so you have nothing to worry about. And that was one of the very last things that I remember before being put out and then finding out I was sick.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy. But colon cancer is the number 1 preventable cancer out there, isn't it?
Right. It is. Yeah. You're talking about it's the number 1 leading cause of death for men and number 2 for women. 1 out of 25 of us at some point in our lives are going to get colon cancer. And it is the most preventable because we now have screening tools and we are now able to have these conversations with doctors that we didn't have 10 years ago. That's part of the reason why I wrote my book and this story, and I'm telling my story is for those who are in their 30s or 40s or wherever, if you've got symptoms and issues, go in and talk to your doctor and get healthy beforehand. I was talking to somebody just this last week. I was down in Tucson for something with the Cologuard Classic. Young man, he is 42, and he told me his story, and he said, yep, I had some blood in my stool. I went to my doctor. My doctor said, let's do a Cologuard test. He took the Cologuard test. He found out he had cancer. The doctor said, okay, you've got cancer. They went in. It turned out it was stage 1. He had a surgery. He was out the next day. No radiation, no chemotherapy, no nothing, and has moved on. In fact, he almost described it like having a wisdom tooth removed. And I thought, wow, what an extreme difference of just to be aware of when something's not going right with your body, to talk to your doctors, for sure.
Could you imagine where he'd have been down the road 5 years later? Well,
Right. Yeah, I did. Right. Exactly. And there was a part for me that I was so happy for him. And that's ultimately what we want people to be at this point. But there was a huge amount of jealousy for me. There was like dang,
Yeah.
I dealt with a lot. Now, granted, it's made me a pretty good person as a result, but it was a lot at the time for sure.
So talking about your book, Iron Dad, and the lessons and the stories you tell and the journey of wanting to be a fantastic example for your daughter, Natalie. But at first you were going to title the book Cancer Blinked. Well,
Yep.
Where'd that come from?
Great question.
Which is kind of a cool title. I mean, Cancer Blinked. But it had to come from somewhere. Where did it come from?
Well, it is ironic. Here I was on one hand saying that I was trying to have this bravado that I was not going to die. I was going to do everything. I was going to do my Ironman. I was going to do all these different things. And so my external point of view was I stared cancer in the eye and cancer blinked. And when you are faced with something that is so overwhelming, so scary, so apocalyptic, and to be able to look at that event or that person or that time and say, F it, I'm not going to let this stop me. And so for a long time, I really tried to have this story be about my cancer experience and talking directly about the symptoms, the issues I ran into, and then finishing the race. Because I mean, finishing, we all know finishing an Ironman triathlon is not for the weak. And I did mine that one up in Whistler. It was a hard race. And so that was the wonderful story just in itself. That was Cancer Blinked, and it had a wonderful finish. I mean, if you have never done the Whistler race, to be in the middle of the trees and the serenity of it and then come across the finish line is beyond amazing. And 10 years later, as I've done now 6 more Ironman, the story has evolved. It's no longer just about cancer blinking and me beating cancer. It is a wonderful legacy I have with my daughter. And the fact that all of these memories that I didn't think I was going to have, I now have, and I get to see and get to experience. Um, and that's how it became to be Iron Dad, because it was an evolution. We are strong.
Mm-hmm.
We are an Iron Man. We are this, but I was strong as iron as a dad for my daughter. And that's how things have evolved.
Beautiful, just beautiful.
Thank
Well,
you.
you are a great advocate for getting it out there on men getting tested. You have social media, celebrity media that you've received. Talk to us about that on some of the shows you've been on and some of the celebrities that have taken this in.
Um, it is humbling. You know, when you and I have talked some about this a few different times, I mean, I have great people like Mike Riley that I get to interview and talk with all the different times. And,
Yeah.
um, but so originally when I wrote my book, it really was meant just to be something that I could give to my daughter, that she would understand the time and she would understand how important she was to me. And then as I started talking with people and the message got important, to be a part of a bigger story, whether it has been, I've been part of it. And it's weird to say out loud because I just want to tell my story and I just want to help save lives. But when we've had Katie Couric include me as part of a PSA, or when we've had conversations with the Today Show, or I bet Natalie and I were on ABC News and able to share that nationally, let alone at a local level. The triathlon community has been so incredible. I have worked incredibly closely with Vic Broomfield and USA Triathlon, and they've actually taken excerpts of my book and published them as part of the story. It's funny, as this is a person who I think was super cool and super important, but now it just says I'm older. Montel Williams and I had a nice conversation about it. Mike Ruzioni and I have too. And but it's not about me. It's about a bigger story. And that if we all can be leaning in and helping change lives, that is super cool. At the same time, you were mentioning at the very start of our interview of all the wonderful people that you interview with all the time. If I could be having 5 minutes with each one of them and having them be able to share the story more and be an advocate, that would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting how when something happens with one's life that they did not see coming, it's a huge curveball, but yet they turn it into what I call straight down the middle fastball. This is what I
Mm-hmm.
have to do. This is what I want to talk to people about. I want to make sure others don't have to go through what I went through.
Right.
But the other side of it is we're athletes, we're triathletes, and we ignore a lot of stuff. So it's kind of a tough deal on both ends of it. And I'll talk at the end about what I think our men in the triathlon world need to do and do it right away. Paul,
Thank you.
if this wasn't your life, if you never had cancer, do you
Hmm.
ever think about that? Would my life be great? Would it be okay? Would it be worse? I'd still be a college professor. I'd still be climbing Mount St. Helens. I'd still be doing Ironmans. But you think that happiness deep in your soul that you have now would be there?
Oh no, not at all. I was I I was talking with one of my best friends last night, and I said to her, "This is my calling, and this is what I'm supposed to do." You talk about you're given a fastball. Um, to start with a small story and then to see it continue to grow and expand and to be able to help change people's lives. I mean, at this point, I probably spend 3/4 of my life focused on cancer awareness and advocacy. I've
Mm.
almost entirely quit my professional career because this is what's important. Um, when I and the beautiful part is I'm doing both. And you ask, would I be just as happy? I am so much happier now. And I am in such a wonderful spot that I have a million experiences that I am so fortunate to have been able to be a part of or have accomplished. I have a story that can continue to help people. I continue to come up with big, ridiculous, audacious goals and find a way to get them done. Um, Along the same lines of things that seem silly to me, this year I am taking part, in addition to a longer distance race, I'm going to be taking part in the USAT US championship in Milwaukee because I
Oh,
qualified. And
good.
I yeah, and for me to have wonderful, unique experiences like that and be able to share them is pretty wonderful. And so I'm this fastball has given me a chance to have my cake and eat it too, for sure.
Yeah, it sure has. Well, Paul, you're 54 now, right? Correct?
Yes, yep.
54 years old. And, the last decade or so has been one hell of a ride for you. And you've said what the catalyst has been, and it's been your daughter, Natalie, and triathlon saved your life.
It
But
did.
if you didn't have triathlon, and especially if you didn't have a daughter, would you have just given up?
Maybe. Um, I don't think anybody ever wants to just give up. Nobody, when in their 30s, is going to say, or 30s or 40s, is just going to say, I'm done, I quit. Um, but there were definitely a lot of thoughts for me. I mean, I had a rough time growing up. I had a distance childhood. Life was hard. And if I had been told I had cancer way back then, I would have said my lot in life was I was supposed to die early. Um, I would have fought, but I wouldn't necessarily have fought with the same amount of vigor or discipline that I have now. Um, it's awful nice to be fighting for something. And
Mhm.
you know, I've said this to you several times. Whether it's crossing the finish line and hearing you are an Ironman, or the very first race that I finished when I just looked up and as I was crossing the finish line, I've got a Livestrong shirt on, and I just pointed at it and I said, "Thank you for my life." Um, so would I have quit? No, but would I have fought the way I have and seen such a great outcome? I'm pretty lucky.
So Natalie's 12 now, correct?
She's actually 14. Yeah, she's getting
14. Oh
older.
my
Yeah,
goodness. Wow, that's crazy.
and
14-year-old. How do you think your 14-year-old Natalie daughter talks to her friends about her dad? What do you think she tells her peers about her old man, huh?
y- that is one of the most awesome things. I fully expected that she would totally rebel and say whatever 14-year-old girls are supposed to do. But every day she tells me she loves me. Every
Good.
day we make a point to have I call it a two-armed closed eye hug because there's power in just having that. And she still lets me do that. Um,
Mm.
when people ask her about me, um, she says wow, she says I'm pretty good. And that's the best thing I ever could have imagined. Uh, I'm sure sometimes she says, I cannot believe he's been all over me for my history test or what I haven't done in math. But deep down, especially now that she's 14, that has been one of such of the cool parts is now that she's 14, she understands what I went through. She understands the fight I did and why I did it. And that's not just the race. It's not just the book. It's not the advocacy. It's all those things together. And she knows that I'm working to make a difference. And I'm pretty sure she tells people that, but I guess you'd have to ask her and her friends. Although, she
Maybe I will.
yeah, maybe that, that's funny. To that point that she was part early on when I started some of these interviews, it was just me. And she has now said she wants to be involved with more and more. And I was at an event, in Miami, and I spoke with the Colorectal Cancer Alliance, and I was interviewing as part of this panel, and I called Natalie from the stage and put her on speaker because it just would be fun. And she was like,
Wow.
Why are you all mumbly? And I was like, I'm just in front of 250 people and I wanted to say I love you. And then I started crying. And then I turned the phone because it was on FaceTime, and she saw all the people and everybody said, hi, Natalie. And she just said, hi, and was so excited to be part of the story. So, now, granted, she did ask about where the Billie Eilish tickets were as part of the conversation, but we've got a pretty neat bond.
Our age groupers out there, triathlon and IRONMAN, and no matter what race you do, it seems to emulate life. But as age groupers have to do, they have to juggle their lives, their family, their relationships, their work, obviously their training schedule, battle injuries, illnesses, physical or mental, and it runs the gamut. But someone like you, I always want to ask someone like you, what advice could you give our age group athletes to push through those tougher times that they may have already had, are having now, or don't even see coming? What advice would you give our age groupers, Paul?
Keep moving forward. The beauty of the Ironman triathlon, of the 2.4 mile swim, the 112 mile bike ride, the marathon, is that, yes, you get beat up and you get chewed out and it is hard work. And I mean, I mentioned my hips, I've had my shoulder worked on, I've had cancer, but each time you get knocked on your side, for me, it was keeping moving forward, but coming up with a plan and finding a way to get it done. If you have a vision that's strong enough and you are willing to do the steps, do it. At the same time,
I'm glad you said that. Go. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. At the same time, being an Ironman triathlete can be very lonely. So I certainly encourage you to embrace your family, embrace your support system, embrace your fellow triathletes, embrace all of those different things. Have those hard conversations with your doctor when something doesn't feel right, so you can be the best person you can be.
And it is amazing when people talk to me about the tough times they're going through, and I always say, so what's the plan?
Right.
Do you have a plan? Do you have it written down? What's the plan? And it kind of wakes people up like, yeah, okay, I want to do this 4 months from now, and I've got to do this. So the plan is everything.
Right.
Paul, my final question on
Yes, sir.
Find Your Finish Line comes out of the Baja 1000. I have friends that race the Baja here, and their trophy trucks and 1,000 miles. I've sat in the second seat. It's a harrowing experience. It's incredible. But afterwards, they get together. They call it table racing. They sit around the table and reminisce about the race or other events that they have done. So I call this tri-table racing. Reminisce with us, whatever event comes to your mind or something that happened in the event, something funny, something sad, whatever you want to do. So try table race with us right now. We're sitting around the table. What do you want to talk about?
My favorite memory, and there have been so many, but my favorite memory where you say, come up with a plan. I mentioned that I did a race 6 weeks after having my tumor removed, and it was not smart, but I had a plan. And I mean, I had purchased this is a while ago, I had purchased my new Cervelo P2C. I was set. I knew that if I did this first race, and then if I did another race, and I did another race, and I found a way to sync them within my treatment program, it would work. But the memory that sticks with me most of how far I came from was on the bike. I'm working as hard as I can going up this hill. And this woman, she had got to be 82, 85 years old on a mountain bike. And
She
she
was
just,
probably, I'm not going to interrupt you, but I love when people tell me that. She was probably like 60, okay, Paul?
well, that is true. That was 10 years ago, and people would probably say the same thing about me now. But to have this person who looked so non-athletic just zoom past me on her mountain bike, and it gave me a perspective of where I was starting from. And every race when things have gotten beyond sucky, I go back to, was it as bad as that moment? And no, it is not. So and so that was one. Most recently, I took part in a marathon in Utah, had huge electrolyte issues, and was about every 15 steps needing to stop to just try and get balanced. But to know that if I kept moving forward, I'd finish and I'd be able to celebrate. Yeah, those are two pretty good memories that are pretty nice bookends.
I like that. Those are good. Paul,
Thank you.
how can people reach you or to speak or get your book? How can they contact you?
Thank you for asking. Yes, so I've got a website which has got lots of great resources. The website is irondadbook.com, irondadbook.com. And there's information and resources about what to deal with colorectal cancer, but also gives information about my book. You can get it on any major platform. And that, yes, I am now going out and talking with a lot of people to be advocates. And any way that I can help share the story, I would be honored to. So thank you for giving me the opportunity.
You got it. Paul Weigel, you are an Ironman, and your story is inspirational. You're inspiring others. And personally, to all of our men and women out there, get tested. Even my 39-year-old son said to me the other day, Dad, I'm going to go get a colonoscopy. He did that on his own. There's really no history in the family of it, but it doesn't hurt to get tested, you guys.
Right.
And if your spouse or partner says to you, you need to go do that, so you do it early at 37, 38 years old, 40, and get it done every 5 years, some every 10 years.
Right.
Just get it done and start the process, because if you don't, you could end up behind the 8 ball, and you don't want that to happen. So suck in your ego. They put you in twilight. It's nothing. You go out a little bit, you come out of it.
It's the best nap of your life, and movie stars pay tens of thousands of dollars for a cleanse like this. Insurance covers it. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, there you go. So get yourself tested out there, guys.
Please do.
Thank you again for listening to Find Your Finish Line. When Paul was talking about just keep moving forward, it brought me to the quote I used to talk about was, if you're standing still, you're going backwards.
Yeah.
So make sure you're not standing still out there, everybody. And always remember, have the best ride of your life, but always stay safe out there. Aloha, everyone. Take care.
Aloha.